Morning, everybody. We'll go ahead and call the April board meeting of the Burleigh County Water Resource District to order. Kelsey or Nina, want to call
Yep.
roll call, please?
Manager Mischel,
Here.
Manager Reed,
Here.
Manager Jones. Here. Manager Smith,
Here.
and Chairman Landenberger.
Here, we do have a quorum. We will continue with the meeting this morning. Item number 2 there, approval of last month's meeting minutes. Any changes or a chance to review that?
I'll second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Manager Jones and a second by Manager Reap to approve last month's meeting minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? The ayes have it. Minutes are approved. Moving on to approval of this meeting's agenda. Any changes or additions? I do want to add one thing under McDowell Dam, item D. Let's add in there, the proposed capital improvement plan that Dave can come up and explain to us here this morning. Kind of walk us through that a little bit. They did hand it out here before the meeting, and it will be emailed out and made part of the minutes. But Dave can come up and kind of walk us through that.
I'll move that we approve the agenda with the proposed amendment.
Second.
Okay. Got a motion by Manager Smith and a second by Manager Jones to approve the agenda as amended this morning. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Ayes have it. Agenda is approved. Okay, moving on to comments from members of the public not associated with a meeting this morning. We're not with a project, not seeing anything. Dennis just was telling us this morning that there is a bill going through the legislature that's going to cause, or basically require us to do more of this, where you allow more public comment at these meetings. So, and so something that we'll have to look at, maybe part of our policy, and they just kind of have some direct rules and things of that nature, how we allow that.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about that, Mr. Chairman, is you've already been doing it.
Yeah.
It's standard practice, it's on your agenda, and I understand, and maybe Dennis got a different impression, but as I understand it, you're doing everything that would require.
Yep.
So,
Dennis had a good point. He thought maybe having some rules, just, either time limits or, things of
Oh, yeah.
that nature.
Yeah, I mean, I think they suggest in the language of the bill that you develop a policy. And so we probably don't have one written down. That's the only thing I would say we'd need to do.
Yeah.
okay, thanks.
Okay. All right, we can then move on to McDowell Dam this morning. Michael, any updates besides the easements or anything regarding the water supply?
Nothing specific, I'll have some stuff for your executive session to go through, so.
Okay.
Okay.
How about on the bank stabilization? Is there?
Yeah, on that one, we did connect with the Corps of Engineers. They are going to be issuing a nationwide permit, so we'll be doing the solicitations for contractors shortly.
Okay.
So I was kind of surprised because last couple of times we've done it because of the length and the added length of the total projects out there, they wanted to go to an IP. We thought we'd try to get the permit issue resolved before we asked for quotes, but got a note from the Corps that they said they were going to issue a nationwide, so that simplifies that process.
What's the approximate dollar amount we're looking at? Do you have?
Between $65,000 and $75,000.
Okay. And I imagine load restrictions are going to be coming off here in the next few weeks.
Maybe.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
When it
Okay.
warms up and it's not raining.
Right.
Well, isn't that yesterday? No, just kidding. No.
Okay. And then we're still looking to plan an emergency action exercise, right?
Yeah, we were talking to Mary about that, and we'll probably put something together this summer. I mean,
Okay, perfect. All right, we can move on to item D then this morning. Dave, good morning.
thanks.
Good morning. Better late than never, I guess. I was hoping to get this to the board a couple months ago, but kind of busy time of the year, so I got a little delayed in getting that to you. I apologize. Did hand out a proposed capital improvement plan for McDowell Dam. We've been talking about this for a while and trying to identify improvement projects, general improvement projects, some equipment replacements and upgrades, and then excuse me, addressing the items that were identified in the access audit, which is now what we call in the Park District our transition plan, is the actions that we're taking from the access audit. Those three main items, we identified the major components, sitting with David Robinson and Michael Sullivan at the Park District, and going through and identifying the major items that we'd like to make improvements on in the property, as well as some upgrades. Excuse me, got a frog in my throat this morning. And then took a stab at breaking it out into years of improvements. What I presented to you this morning is a 4-year plan. I don't know the appetite of the board as far as a dollar amount each year. So yesterday, I as I was printing this out, I kind of stopped for a second and thought, well, what would it look like if we said, okay, we can't do this amount per year, it's less. How many years out does it push it? And we can discuss that. You know, I think what I did was I tried to divide this up into a smaller dollar amount each year, somewhere in the $150,000 to $200,000 a year, and it pushed it out to 6 or 8 years. But these were the major components in this proposed capital improvement plan that were identified by staff to make some substantial improvements to the property, and probably, in our eyes, make it a lot more enticing and inviting for people to come out and use the property and enjoy the property and have it there for many years to come. There are additional things that, as we go through the years, things will come off and we'll want to add things. So I think it's going to be more of a rolling plan that we'll want to take things off and add them as we go. Some things, as I'm standing here talking to you, the docks, they aren't on this list. They will need to be refreshed, replaced, that kind of thing. The capital improvement, or the transition plan in the access audit, I counted them up. The consultant that did the study for us for the access audit identified 79 items out at McDowell Dam. Some of them very, 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 very minor. And then when I looked at the two major components in the access audit, which was the shower building and the restroom, and those are the two things that you can see in here that we talked about, that we had Ubel Design do that study for us to identify how we address those. There were roughly 29 or 30 of those items were directly from those two buildings. So you're taking care of a good chunk of them with those two buildings being updated or replaced, which is a good thing. The other items are things that we identified in our transition plan, which would be addressed at a later date because it's a major redesign. Some of the parking stalls do not meet code, so those would be addressed when the parking lot gets resurfaced. Those kind of things, because it requires some regrading, some things like that. Those are the acceptable processes that we have identified for addressing some of those issues. So again, just wanted to present this. We have been thinking long and hard about how we try and address most of this as soon as possible, but some of them take time. We're not going to redo an entire parking lot in the first year when the parking lot's in good shape, to address the issue. It's acceptable to address the issue identified as a parking lot problem when the parking lot needs to be replaced. So then you're regrading the whole thing, not just taking out a chunk.
Good. Yep. Good. Questions?
Dave, is there a requirement or a timeline to address access audit items?
No, there is not. The transition plan, so part of the steps to make sure that first of all, we identified the issues, right? We know that there's a problem with the access audit. The next is to create a transition plan. And through that transition plan, we identify what is acceptable, palatable we're still making steps forward, making progress forward with meeting and addressing the issues that were identified. But we also we create a timeline. It could be 10 years, it could be 15 years, it could be 20 years, but some of those things would be taken care of as we progress. At the Park District level, we have gone through in that transition plan and identified some of those things. For example, shelters, in the access audit, he identifies that this shelter does not have an accessible table. This shelter, essentially, he looks at every piece individually, but recognize that as a park, only a portion of it needs to be accessible, not every single thing. If they're all like items, only one of them or two of them. At Bismarck Parks, we identified that our goal is at least 30% of things. So if it's a park with 10 shelters, 3 of them would be accessible. For the example that I give in the park district is at Sertoma Park, we've got 11 shelters there. We selected 4 shelters with varying different attributes to them to make them completely accessible. So we address that same principle to McDowell Dam in the fact that we would probably want to take 2 of the shelters and make sure that they're 100% compliant. If there are different unique items near them, we would select them a little bit further apart, not just 2 similar ones. So we do take a larger in-depth look at those kind of things.
Okay.
So currently, we have no handicap accessible shelters. Am I correct in assuming that?
Yes, yep, we have not, so part of the accessibility element with the shelters is that there needs to be an accessible table, and we do not have any accessible tables out there at this time. So those would be some things to address. There is a percentage that you want to get, if there's 10 tables, you want to have I believe it's by code, I think it's 2, but we look at it as at a minimum of 1.
Right.
And I shouldn't say code, by principle. So we're inching towards that. We're working towards it. I think what we'll do is identify, as we purchase additional accessible tables, we'll make sure we add some to the list for McDowell Dam and sub out some of the older tables. Some of the shelters have sidewalks to them. Some of them don't.
Right.
Accessibility there, meeting those requirements.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just for information for the board, last 2 budget cycles, as we do our budget calculations and preparing our budget requests, we've had $150,000 in there for capital improvements on McDowell Dam each year. As the sausage gets made, that kind of gets washed out. But the other thing I'll just note is that in our reserve funds, we have a $60,000 balance identified for McDowell Dam capital improvement.
60,000?
60,000.
60?
Yep, 60.
In addition to the 150?
Well, the 150 just kind of goes into the request that goes into the county commission, and, they approve what they approve, and so, but that was identified, and we've, consistently done that knowing that this is in the works, so. I mean, I look at this, I see, 250,000 and 26, 260,000. I don't have any concerns about it as this is laid out. But this is good information to have as we prepare that budget request, and we can point to this and say, okay, the county commission, this is one of the things that we need to be responsible for, so.
Yep.
Good.
If I could ask one question, would it be, I guess, acceptable for us to consider moving forward with the items that are identified in 26 for the budget for 26, or should I maybe dial it back, exclude one of those items? Do we push the park security to the next year just so we're not up on that dollar amount to the limit? And the reason I pick that one is I look at the new equipment with the tractor as would be really beneficial out there to have a new piece of equipment. What David is running out there is a really antiquated tractor that is getting harder and harder to find parts from Russia for this tractor. And the other tractor that's out there is much smaller, and it doesn't really give us the flexibility. And then I say that item because the other one on there is the shower building. I would really like to see that one addressed so that we are, working towards that accessibility, and it does need the updates.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we could take a look at it, maybe, Dennis, and just see what.
Yeah, my first impression, Dave, is, and this is just one board member saying this, is I wouldn't have I don't see any issue with, that as part of a, planning process for you.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have some reserves, and, we have had some additional, interest coming in from these CDs too, so I think we could.
To do everything for 26?
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
and this is, is this kind of been vetted through your organization? This is a good priority for you?
Yes, yep, we have reviewed it. I reviewed it with our executive director, and
Sure.
he seemed all right with it. So we're,
Quick question. In the city parks that you manage, do you have any security systems now?
we do have some camera systems in the park district, yes.
And they're fed to your office?
Yes.
Or are they fed to
They're fed to my office.
So this particular one will be fed to David's house?
Not sure exactly which location the hard drive or the monitoring system would be identified. I mean, the way that the systems work right now is I could look them up on my phone if I needed to.
Okay.
So
Okay,
it's,
that's what I was-
yes, yeah, it's not physically a hard line. They're accessible on the internet, but they're secured.
All
Yep.
right, just so we can kind of keep an eye 24 hours, because we have had some issues out there in the past.
Yes.
Thank you.
One suggestion on your 27 plan on the UTV, I would increase that, having purchased a UTV in the last year and a half or so. And I would suggest that you look, particularly if your goal is access during all winters, then you'd want to include a set of tracks, and that's $6,500 just for the tracks. And,
Yeah.
So I would up that number some.
Yep. Well, yes, definitely. We'll take that into consideration. And realistically, the UTV that David has identified is just a smaller two-seater side-by-side that's not, if we can get back in there during the winter, that'd be great, but it would not be the biggest
Well,
priority.
but you would like a cab and heat.
Right.
And,
Yep.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
But
Yes.
still, they're surprisingly high.
Yes, they are.
Yes, they are. Do we keep the counters on during the winter months?
We do keep those on, and I apologize I didn't get those numbers for you this morning.
Okay, but they're considerably lower than they are in the.
Yes, considerably lower. I think I gave Michael some information that he was looking for. I think during the winter months, we're probably down into the low hundreds, 400, possibly during the winter months, and then when we get up into the busy season, June, July, August, we're we're probably, I'd probably say we're probably closer to 5,000-6,000.
I'm
For-
sure you are.
yeah.
I'm sure you are. Okay, just curious.
Okay. Any other questions? Just for Chuck, so Chuck, we went through a process, I remember with Manager Vinegar here, that 2 years ago, and we kind of went out and we did kind of a full assessment of the park and all the facilities, and he was out there with Dave, and that's kind of how we put this list together, is just kind of identifying what we felt was a priority, a listing of, some major, other than just kind of some regular maintenance items that we have to do from time to time. And then part of that too was, as Dave was mentioning, was a accessibility audit that we had to do for our facilities, for handicap accessibility, those things. And so that's kind of what we're trying to merge together now, is kind of this plan. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to put this together. This has been very helpful. I think to Dennis's point, I think understanding kind of where we're at with the budget-wise, maybe it's not 250, but maybe it's 200 that we kind of plan for, maybe bump this out a year or two, but we can kind of keep talking and looking at this. I do think that first 2026 is very doable. Planning for that restroom replacement probably makes sense for that 2027. So I think what you have lined out here makes a lot of sense to me. I remember through that process, we kind of talked about the rental building as needing a lot of work and needing something that's a bigger item that we're kind of pushing out a few years, so we could maybe build up some reserves for that. So I like how you put that in there. And then, like the ball field improvements. I mean, there's a lot of really neat features out there that I think if we upgrade and improve on, that we'll get other visitors out there, visiting the park for various reasons. So I do like, the fact that we've got a 5-year plan here. Maybe we push that out to 6 or 7, but we'll get it figured out. So good. Okay.
And I could send you a copy of what it would look like if we spread it out too.
Yeah, I think that'd be
Maybe
good.
we took a look at 2 items a year instead of 3
Yeah,
items
maybe
a year, something like that.
Target more of that 2 to 250 as opposed to 250 to 300 kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Also, to point out the rental shack, we don't know what that's going to cost.
Yeah.
One thing I didn't put in here, and maybe I should, is plans for having a consultant, an architectural consultant, to do a study on it for us. And maybe that happens a couple of years prior to when that project happens.
Makes sense.
And
Yep.
then adding a dollar amount in there for that study, just to kind of plan ahead.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Okay.
Good job.
Yeah.
As you plan this out, I assume there's maybe a few of these items that might be eligible for some type of grant, outdoor heritage fund,
Right.
garrison diversion.
Absolutely, and thank you for reminding me. Just an update on that is we did submit the playground project that we're constructing this year for the Garrison Diversion Conservancy District. I went up to Carrington to present that in the end of March, and we found out that we were successful in that.
Very good.
So
Great.
Thank
there's
you.
a 25% match for that playground project
Yep.
Great.
through them that will be received. So there are many projects in this list that would be eligible for that grant in particular.
Yep. Good. Yeah, that's a good point, Dennis. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for Dave this morning? All right, none?
Thank you.
Dave. Yeah, good job. Okay, we can move on then to the next item. If there's nothing else on McDowell Dam, we can move on to financial reports this morning. Dennis, yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, board members, as noted in your agenda, we did not get the review of March activity prepared for this meeting. One of the reasons is that we didn't get information as far as what the distribution from Burleigh County was, what it represented state aid versus real estate taxes, and then I think Wendy just had some other issues going on, and so we'll do that retroactively, do that report at next month's meeting with your permission. And so won't go over that.
Consensus on that?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you. On page 6 is the NDERF. You'll notice, and we talked about this a little bit, but we are getting a refund from NDERF. We have no idea what that means. It could be $1,000. I don't know. It could be $20. But there is an annual meeting there. I think they're looking for a RSVP. I don't know if anybody intends to go, but if you intend to go, maybe there's a
form to fill out.
there's a form to fill out.
Yeah, if you're interested.
I guess that's over on new business. I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, and then item C, we do have CDs coming due April 12th. 2 of them in the amount of $500,000 each. I did email out where we are at with our CDs. Currently, we have 1.3 million in CDs roughly. These $1 million of those are coming due on April 12th. Another one's coming due in June 12th. The Bravera Wealth Money Market that we also have money in is pretty competitive as you compare it to CD rates, and it's perfectly liquid. So I guess barring, we can talk about it. Let me go over what I did have quotes from Bravera Bank as what they could offer for CDs. Internally, they could offer 5 months at 4.1%, which is 4.15 annual percentage yield. 11 months at 4.01%, 15 months at 3.51%, and 36 months at 2.75%. And then, let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to get to the other option where they could sell on the street. Didn't open that up. Do you have that, Kathleen? Did I give that sheet to you?
Do you need it back?
Yeah, let's read over that real quick. And then, other ones they offered, 3 months is basically a 4.1 to 4.3%. 6 months, 3.95 to 4.15%, and then it kind of slowly goes downward as you get longer durations. I guess my thoughts are, is that we would let these CDs expire and transfer them over to the Bravera Wealth account, since that rate currently is about as good as you're getting on any CDs anyway, and it's liquid.
Any other thoughts or questions on that? I mean, to me, I agree, Dennis, if we're getting currently 4.3 and that's was about the higher end of any of the CD amounts, why wouldn't we?
And just to refresh, keep in mind, it's got a 0.25%
Yeah.
monthly fee associated with it, so effectively it's about a 4.07% right now.
So that one's not tied to a term.
Right.
It's fluctuating monthly.
Right.
The only reason, and I'm not advocating for it, but the only reason to think about getting tied in is if we thought, and nobody knows, the interest rates were gonna go down considerably, you'd maybe wanna tie in for 11 months, so just throwing that out there. I'm not advocating for it, but
Yeah.
if we don't, if we knew what was gonna go on, we'd probably not be sitting here.
And these rates on the wealth count update the 1st and the 15th of each month, so they semi-monthly.
Right.
They've been pretty consistent since we've started using it. It's
Yep.
dropped a little.
Well, and if we start to see that dropping, we could then
Yeah.
quickly pivot and,
We could, with the theory that it's monitored closely, it's not
Yep.
necessarily monitored all that closely, but yeah.
yeah. At least on a somewhat monthly basis, we're kind of seeing it, right? As
Yeah.
these become mature here now in the next few months.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so probably have to have a motion then to look to, as these mature, these two CDs mature, that we move them into the Bavarian Wealth. Okay?
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Manager Jones and a second by Manager Smith to, as these two CDs that are coming up due April 12th mature, that we move them into the Bavaria Wealth Money Market that we currently have the other funds in. Okay, we take roll call vote, please.
Manager Mitchell,
Yes.
Manager Reed,
Yes.
Manager Jones.
Yes.
Manager Smith,
Yes.
and Chairman Landenberger.
Yes, motion passes. Thank you. Okay, anything else, Dennis, financial-wise? No?
Nope.
Okay, we can then move on to drainage permits and complaints this morning. River Road, any updates this morning? I think at this point, we've,
Casey to bring us up to date on that,
yeah, I think at this point, we made a request last month, and so it's,
and it's getting worse.
it's getting worse.
It's getting worse as the thaw goes out. It's dropping.
Morning, Casey.
Good morning. Once the area dries out more, once the snow didn't really help, because if we go in right now, we just tear everything
Sure.
up on that. But once it dries out more, our plan is go in there, get it cleaned up, get everything smoothed out again, reseed it, make sure it looks nice. We just want to be able to work with them.
Okay.
Yep. But I think we have everything set up. It's just waiting for it to dry out at this point.
And that's a 36-inch culvert? Or is that
Um,
22?
I'd have to double check. I thought it was a little bit larger, but I can double check on that.
Okay.
On there.
Well, just so we put the same size back in there.
That's a longer term part than what the downstream sedimentation is. The upstream on that's just looking at, it's a longer range plan on that
Yeah.
part.
At this point, we're just kind of looking at cleaning out some sediment and,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and we're not saying the culvert doesn't need to be worked on. It does. It's just all the stuff you have to do underneath to stabilize it. That's more the longer reaching part.
Yeah.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Casey. Keelboat Park, I don't know, Michael, if there's any update this morning?
Yeah, a couple things on that. There's been some correspondence going back and forth in emails. In short, if you want to call it the developer and the change in plans down there in the development, they were talking about doing some improvements to the bank stabilization down there, which is a Section 32 project, which is under the purview of the State Water Commission, DWR, along with the financial obligation of the Water Resource District at 50% for maintenance. In taking a look at that, we wanted to make sure that all the easements were, number one, shown in the GIS platform that you have adequately, and the fact which easements actually apply to that particular site. So we did the research, looked back at that. In looking at the research, we noted a number of things relative to the municipal sixth plat, and that the easements were not shown properly on that plat. And there's a couple of things with the easements. The one easement, because when the city of Bismarck acquired that, there's a century code where the easements disappear. I guess I was somewhat familiar with that, but the bottom line of that, access still needs to be provided to that structure pursuant to the original O&M agreement with the DWR. So we're kind of working through that. I talked to Gabe Shell, city engineer, and they were going to modify and adjust the municipal sixth plat for that particular easement issue. And then there's the discussion of the western boundary of that plat being potentially affecting sovereign lands. And you can't plat sovereign lands. So this afternoon, there's a meeting at the DWR to discuss that as to what was done and how, to step forward on that. So I will attend that. Invited Roger and Dennis, and everybody's busy. So I don't think it's a critical component, but we'll just go step through and find out where the district's obligations may play in that.
Okay.
So it was a good exercise to go back and look at things. We did find out a couple of things relative to the easements that were corrected, and the GIS also found out that Esri decided to change the GIS application and we couldn't use it anymore. So we ended up having to redo that and get that back up and running again, and it is. And the new link has been put on the website, so everything's good to go.
Okay. All right. Any questions on that? If not, thanks, Michael. Okay, we can move on to skip over item 8, nothing that's been
Yeah.
closed recently.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
one
go ahead.
item that I just emailed out, there was a email complaint, if you will, that was filed by Mr. Don Hogue,
Oh, yeah.
roadway up around Baldwin. I had a couple of conversations with him as well as, so we went through that. Casey and I talked about that a little bit this morning. We need to get Don to finish out the form. After the form is actually completed, then we can step through and actually complete a memorandum. I think there's a lot of information out there that's already there. It's just a matter of if this board has the complaint to actually document what that is and make a decision. Sounds as though it's a low-maintenance roadway, and I don't know if it ends up being an obstruction. That's kind of the question that's out there relative to the culverts that's in place. So as soon as Don Hogue gets that, Casey, I don't know if you want to touch on that at all, but as soon as we get the complaint formally from Don, then we can proceed. I guess we'd be looking at board consensus if that form is actually submitted, that we could start the process rather than wait for your next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Morning again. So 201 for the first mile west of US 83 is a township road, and that's under maintenance. Going west of there, it is a no maintenance road. It's not a minimum maintenance. There's no maintenance. It's not even considered a road. Now, where that culvert was placed that Don is talking about, we met with Glenview Township yesterday, and Glenview Township is going to take the lead in addressing where that culvert is. We did go out and look at it. The culvert is east of where the low area is on there. No one's disputing that it affects the upstream landowner. And talking with Glenview, it needs to be moved to the low area, maybe do a little bit of touch up on the ditches, get everything to flow a little bit smoother, and be able to do that. Now, who installed it? Great question. I don't know off the top of our head. Somebody went in, they put in a plastic culvert, which if it's an actual maintenance road, we don't allow plastic underneath the roadways, but since it's not a road, it doesn't exist, somebody just went out and kind of did this. Then there's another area that's further west of there that years and years ago had some maintenance done. It has been off of maintenance for a long time, and it kind of goes off the section line. It's a very steep ravine, difficult area, and water does flow down that, erodes off and goes downstream. In speaking with Glenview Township yesterday, we talked to them about us placing signs for them, and it's basically advisory signs saying, it is a section line, but this isn't a road. It's hazardous. We recommend you actually don't even go down it. And we're talking to them about placing it on the east side of where it's no maintenance road, and on the west side, so both directions no, and be able to go from there. So Don probably just didn't know Glenview Township was talking to us. I know Don had contacted Glenview, and he's contacted us about it, and it's speed of government, it is being addressed, just maybe not as fast as Don would appreciate.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of like, thanks, Casey, that's kind of what I gathered from the email too, Michael. This is more of a road and access issue than it is a water resource issue. Clearly that, we can't prevent landowners from putting in a small culvert across a section line, and, if they're trying to gain some access, that's, as long as they're not impeding the flow, which doesn't seem that that's the issue. It's the issue more of the road becoming, non-drivable, or not even a road, I shouldn't even say it's a road, it's more of a trail, section line trail. But
The scenario that comes in obviously is this section line road as it currently sets an obstruction? Was it an obstruction created by somebody, or is it just because people have been driving down a non-maintenance area? So with that aspect, I do have Don's email address, I do have his phone number. I can rotate him back and basically say, hey, it looks like this is actually moving somewhere, for lack of a better way of saying it. And if he wants to file the form, he can. If he just wants to wait for the process to kind of play out, he can do that as well. And then we'd only react if, in fact, he formalizes the complaint.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the complaint would be.
Yeah, I think there's two separate issues Don's talked about. One's the culvert, which is holding some water back on the north side. That does need to get shifted and moved to the right location, and Glenview Township's taking the lead on getting that done. The other's further down the no maintenance, and that's a whole different issue. We've tried to address that in the past, and we got to be able to obtain easements, and if people don't want to grant us easements, there's not a whole lot we can do about it at that point.
Good. Thanks, Casey. Any questions for Casey?
Mr. Chairman, before he leaves, Don, I've talked to Don several times on this, and so has Michael, but I think his complaint is two different. I think you mentioned two different. Will this complaint letter take care of both of those? Are we going to address the road? And the road, I think, should be the highway department, but the water problem is ours, I think. Is that correct?
So the first complaint is with the culvert. I think that'll address what he emailed about.
Yeah.
The
Water.
second part, it's actually Glenview Township's road. They decide, and they've said this is a no maintenance road. It's not. They don't consider it a road. I'm not saying it's not a gravel, and it's not even gravel, a dirt path that someone can try and go down. We've gone down it before. I would recommend not even trying to drive it unless it's been dry for a month. And even then, the ravines in it are severe. The ruts in it are really bad. I wouldn't recommend going down there. And that's part of what we talked about with Glenview Township. Let's just put in advisory signs up that it's very hazardous. We recommend you do not go down it at all.
Okay.
Sorry if I missed this. Is it an abandoned section line embankment? I mean, is it an embankment?
It's not abandoned. It was never built to any roadway standard.
But it is an embankment at one.
It's a ravine, so you got a 60-foot drop on the south side, a really rutted out dirt path, then it drops another 60-some feet going down. It's very heavy terrain, and it was kind of a path someone might have gotten through once upon a time, and I wouldn't recommend trying to drive down it.
It's not section line, is it?
Yeah.
It is a section line, but part of it goes off of section line because they were trying to follow the terrain a little bit, but that's why it's also considered a no maintenance road. Where if it's by law, if it's minimum maintenance and it's a bus route, you then have to build it to road standards. That's why it's not a minimum maintenance. That's why it's a no maintenance road. So to us, you're kind of getting in the weeds, a little technical, but that's why we try to be very clear on what that road is. And just try to say it's not a road.
Yep.
So,
Mr. Chairman,
I think,
if Casey,
Go ahead.
is there signage on that, anywhere along that access?
Currently, on the east-west of 201, no. And that's why we were talking with Glenview Township. Let's put the signage up that advises it's a hazardous route and that they shouldn't, we recommend not going down. But we can't do regulatory sign It's an advisory sign, so the yellow signage. And we have that in different areas throughout the county. We just have to have the permission of the township, since they're the roadway authority, of do they want to have the road under maintenance, or do they want a minimum maintenance road, or declare it a no maintenance area. And since they've declared it no maintenance, and it has been for a while, they were just, let's just make sure we're clear on it, let's put the signs up, and then everybody knows.
Thank you.
Okay, then, Mr. Chairman, to kind of close this out, I will I'll call Don, let him know that Glenview Township is working with the Burleigh County Highway Department to address the issues that are out there. And then I will follow that up with an email and said if those issues are not addressed, and you still wish to file a complaint, here's the form to fill out.
Very good.
That way, we're not doing anything we don't need to do. And it sounds like there's a lot of things being done in the background. Presumably that resolves the issue. It may not, but we'll let that play out first. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, Casey. Thanks, Michael. Okay, we can then move on to item 9 this morning, projects. Any updates, Michael, on Hogue Island at this point?
No, we'll just kind of let that go by the wayside. I
Yep.
will be talking to DWR relative to the bank stabilization permits and easements, so I'll probably have a brief discussion with them as to what's being planned at Hogue Island, because I'll have all the players in the room.
Right.
So, okay.
Okay. And we can move on to item B, the Apple Creek U Mary slide. You guys had a meeting on Monday.
We did. I'm going to let Michael rehearse the summary of the meeting and what we're going to do going forward.
Okay, thank you, Roger. I did do a handout that you see from the process. We had a really good meeting with the stakeholders, basically the Water Resource District, University of Mary, and DES, and DWR was there as well, discussing what was out there and the current plan set. Russell Sheets from Bar Engineering was there, kind of explained what they're seeing as far as the status of the slide area. There is a lot of surface impacts associated with water coming out of a lignite seam up above, erosion on the slope. Primarily, that's a visual. It doesn't look good, but it doesn't affect the stability of the slope itself. So they will be working to do some regrading of the small scarps that appeared after the process was originally stabilized, and that'll be taken care of this spring. They are putting in additional monitoring wells. Don't quote me on the number, but I think they've got 3 borings and 3 soil borings to analyze what's out there today, as well as 3 inclinometers. The inclinometers are used to determine slope movement, so they're putting those in. So that's where the University of Mary is going. That process is underway. They agreed to share all of their information with the Water Resource District and the review of the lower slope. We had the geotech consultants online as well, so they were watching the discussion, trying to make sure that when we collaborate and coordinate, that we're not putting anything out there that is already being put out there by UMary. Because the plan is to put several inclinometers out there to find out what's happening with the lower slope. General discussion, I think everybody's got kind of an idea as to what may be happening, or shall I say that everything's probably stable now that it's shifted. That's to be determined. But from a grant perspective, DES was there, and I gave you a summary of the discussion with DES. If the district approves or concurs with the short email and presentation I put together, DES would submit that grant application to FEMA, and then probably within a month or so, the funds would be authorized. The other aspect of it is that once they submit it to FEMA, they are in essence approving preliminary work. University of Mary has agreed to share all of the geotechnical and design data with our geotechnical team so that we can start that process before the formal grant approval. You can get dollars, and those would still be eligible funds. The other one in the total process from a budgetary perspective is that the emergency action plan funds, which were $10,000 in SA30, are not eligible for the grant because they're not a physical feature. So that would be a board expense. The other thing is, given the cost increases that were projected at your last meeting, they have a cap on these at $275,000. The scenario with that cap is if other funds are available after other projects are completed and they don't need them all, there is the opportunity for additional funds to be allocated above the 275, but that's yet to be determined. So in essence, bottom line, when you take a look at it, the obligation of the board, if everything were to play out exactly as projected, would be about $74,000. We talked a little bit about the what-ifs on the lower portion and what might need to be done, if anything. Obviously, we don't know the details on that yet, but once the grant is completed, there would be a, if you want to call it a project plan as to what might need to be done on that lower slope to stabilize it. I would speculate, and I did during the meeting, that if the upper slope is in fact just shifted and it's now engaged and stable, in other words, it's not moving like is intended under their BRIC grant, that the lower slope improvements might just be a simple regrading and shaping of what's down there to basically stabilize and get rid of the fault cracks that are there. What that entails as far as cost, don't really know at this point. So again, in short, if the district concurs with this number, DES will submit the grant application as submitted. We do have a couple more documents we need to get to them, but the approval of that would occur in May or June, they said, depending upon timeline. Obviously, the background scenario is, everybody's probably heard, the FEMA has now stopped the BRIC grant program, so there's a number of grants that have now fallen by the wayside, but that's an ongoing thing. It does not affect the funding here. I think that's the important point to understand.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Questions for Michael on that? So, Michael, help us, there's actually like 3 separate areas of slide that are happening out
Right.
there, right? And so is this gonna help us in looking at all 3 of those?
This is primarily based on the major slide area.
Yeah.
There is one.
The farthest one downstream.
Well, actually, there's one further south of this, if I recall.
Okay.
But none of them present a significant risk to the public, except this one. We did look at the upper one. If that one were to fail, it doesn't create any major backwater issues because of where it's at in the system. The one downstream is the same way. I mean, there's a place for the water to go around it and not have an significant adverse impact to other areas. Though the scenario with the emergency action plan can be in place for all 3.
Yeah.
Because
right.
the process will work for all 3.
Notifying landlords.
So that's the value of completing that, but it really isn't any analysis to go fix those other ones. Because I don't see, at least in my impression and opinion, there's really no dollar value associated with really doing those repairs. You just kind of monitor them and address the failure when and if it occurs.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks, Michael.
Yep.
I don't know, Mary, is there anything you want to add or anything this morning? Just not putting you on the spot, but I know you were at these meetings, but any concerns or thoughts or moving forward, discussions with DES or?
No, this grant is not affected by the FEMA BRIC grant cancellation, and even that grant, there's other avenues that they might be able to work toward if it's a congressional appropriation, but the HMGP grants we're talking about are not part of that, so
Okay.
we're good so far.
Good.
We're
Okay.
just in it for the ride.
Okay, thanks, Mary. Okay, I don't think we need any action at this point. I think we're just waiting for the additional comments from DES before we submit.
Yeah, I guess the action from this board would just be concurrence with the revised budget numbers.
Yeah, basically the revised.
And as long as
numbers,
there's
either
concurrence there,
74,000.
and we probably should have that concurrence in the record for the minutes, and then we'll just move forward.
Okay, concurrence?
Yeah.
Any concerns? Okay,
Mike, or anybody, I've not looked at these photos for a while. Has it been any additional movement since it first started, last time we looked at it? Last fall?
Here's my take going through each one. Casey can probably address it too. Since the first movement and after the rock were put in, the only movement that appears to have occurred is if you want to call it the surface erosion that's happening. Barr has looked at the minor shifts that occurred during that period as far as the total soil mass. And the other changes that have occurred have been the block slides or the material that's falling off on the east side of the bank that's basically eroding down and going into the Missouri River. So you'll notice the channel was narrowed, the rock was put in, And now the channel's starting to widen itself back out again because it's eroding off the material that's fallen in. In short, I mean, that's what I'm seeing. It doesn't appear a whole lot wider now than it probably was last fall. I mean, maybe Casey can kind of touch on that.
No, it doesn't appear a whole lot of changes. You just see some of it's what was done, taking on the load, where the block cracks have widened a little bit, but some of that is drainage, and they still got some parts they need to finish up on their end of their project anyways. The only part we've really seen is more the downhill area of where they installed everything to help stabilize their parts. But like Mike said, you'll see little shifts. We have the rock, so we have the tougher side now, and it's just going to erode the material on the other side a little bit.
It's kind of working as planned a little bit.
Yeah,
In theory.
yeah, you can see downstream of where we have the rock, it's probably chewed into the bank a little bit, but that's on private property. That gentleman has called us, asked what we can do, and it was, as a highway department, I'm confined to the roadway. I can't do private property, but it was, if you want to start the process, work with the Corps, as a private individual, you certainly can. Cost, I'm sure, is a major concern for the landowner on that, but we try to help where we can and let them know the limitations that we have too.
Yeah. Thanks, Casey. I will add, Dennis, those last pictures that got sent out from Michael, that is that slide that's happening further upstream. It's not the one that we've been kind of monitoring more closely. It's, photos from,
Okay.
yeah. So it looks different. That's kind of,
Some of them are, some
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
some are where we were though,
yeah.
right?
The farther zoom back pictures kind of shows the whole slide area.
A couple other things, Mr. Chairman, real quick. From the standpoint of the activities that are out there, there was a lot of good discussion and collaboration. There's a wetland area that is impacted where the project that University of Mary is doing would have to remove that material. But it's also the access road, should we do anything, or should we need to get equipment in? So there's discussions of what the contractor may be able to finish, and holding the contract open from the University of Mary side so that we can get in and with the equipment to actually do the borings and monitoring. And then there's also a small portion of the access roadway that their DES is now considering to be paved. They didn't consider it or allow it the first time, but it's eroded and washed out 3 times. So there's background stuff, but I just want to say the collaboration's been really good.
Yep.
To deal with both sides so that we're not duplicating things out there and not causing issues for DES as well. Oh, the other one, and I know Dennis has been talking about this one too. Now that we've got this in place, we can put it in front of the DWR for discussion as far as eligibility. I suspect that's more of an office staff discussion, but they won't do it until they have the web grants application in place. So we'll have to deal with you, James, as far as the sign off on that.
Yep.
When we get there. So
Okay.
okay.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, if not, we can move on to other old business this morning. I don't see Mitch here this morning. I don't know if there's any updates on this here. Oh, he is here. Oh, he was behind the, good morning, Mitch. Sorry.
He knows what hold
He's hiding from
pipeline.
us.
No.
Morning, board members.
Morning.
In response to the president's executive order on March 18th, FEMA has restricted travel to some of its regions. So the cab visit for May 7th and 6th and 7th has been delayed.
Okay.
They have, in the order, they have 248 days to respond to that change in their management process. And so they haven't given me an alternate date. They just said that it's on hold.
Okay.
We're still working on it. We're still, submitting documents and creating folders for some of the information that needs to be submitted. But, we're still moving forward with it. I think, it could be up until November before we get an answer, but it could be next month. We don't know.
Okay. Thanks, Mitch. Any updates on the legislation that was maybe getting pushed through to help with the townships versus,
That was approved.
that was approved?
Yeah,
On both-
yeah, the
both sides?
2027, HB 2027 was approved.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll go into beginning of the year.
Okay,
So it's,
that should
yeah.
help.
Yeah, I have talked to 2 townships about it. That have the FEMA mapped areas.
Yeah.
And they haven't told me what they want to do, but, we've offered our services. I gave them a blank copy of our ordinance, and so that's
See where it
in
goes.
their works.
Okay, all right. Any questions for Mitch? Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we can move on to new business this morning. In the packet on pages 9 through 17 is the latest legislative update. I don't know, Dennis, is there any particular bills we want to summarize this morning?
Maybe a few. House Bill 1020 is a primary appropriations bill for the Department of Water Resources and then general funding for water. And as you maybe are aware, it came out of the House in really good condition. It got over the Senate, and they had the reforecast of the of oil prices and revenue income based off of those. And so the Senate, of course, took a harder look at it and basically cut out about $250 million out of that accumulated appropriation. Of course, that it'll go back to conference committee, but much of the reduction came from some of the major projects, water supply, Southwest Pipeline, Western Area Water Supply, Mouse River. Those are the ones that got a lot of their House version appropriations reduced. And then it might affect some of the full-time employees that the department had requested. They'd requested 7. I think the Senate version maybe reduced it down to 5 or 6.
I see the South Bismarck too was removed out of that.
South Bismarck was removed out of it, yep.
Okay.
House Bill 1218, economic analysis. If you recall, Sibley Island went through an economic analysis. The bill original version had set a threshold of anything under $5 million. Any project under $5 million would not be subject to economic analyses. Through negotiations, that number was reduced down to $750,000. Currently, the policy from the State Water Commission is $200,000. Our project still would have had to go through it at that threshold, but as kind of a compromise, I think they're looking at doing some more study in the interim until the next session, but no rural flood control projects will be required to do economic analysis in the 25 to 27 biennium. So kind of a partial, I guess maybe improvement from our perspective at least on that front. 2210 watershed boundary study basically will look at how can water resource districts and watersheds be better managed from a watershed perspective, and so an interim study has been passed. I think that will sail through. Maybe it has already, so if I don't know that, but so that'll happen. Senate Bill 2276 joint boards, if you recall last, and we've seen it in the Missouri River Joint Board, the requirement that all county water resource districts become part of those major joint boards. 2276 took that even further and identified some of the less major watersheds. And what they're really trying to address is where neighboring counties get in conflicts over assessment district projects. There's basically three situations across the state, all of them in the eastern part. And so, as it was written, the water resource districts, opposed it. They've offered an amendment. The bill sponsor agrees with that amendment. So hopefully that'll pass, and basically it'll take away that requirement and just put in some parameters for neighboring counties as they're trying to manage assessment district projects or other projects where there's joint funding. Set some parameters on how they can manage those, and so that's being heard this week and will come out of House committee this week, and so hopefully that amendment takes hold. What else? Talked about 2027, that think that was it, except for 2180 we talked about briefly, and I think we're required to have public comment. We already do it. I think we just need to develop some policy, and so maybe, it'll become effective July of this year.
Mhm.
So at some point before July, we should have a policy in place.
Okay. Any questions? Any other thoughts on the, okay.
So I did have one question. So on the joint board, what really changed? Is there still a requirement that every water resource board be part of the joint board?
I mean,
So that did not change?
The laws that were passed in the past session are still in effect, of course. Let's see. So 2276 would just basically, as it was originally written, would have just expanded that to more situations, so Knife River watershed. I don't know if that one was identified, but some of those smaller watersheds would have that those same type of parameters that you must be a member, if I understand it correctly. And again, they're just trying to address those situations where there's disagreements between counties on projects.
Right.
So if it's amended, I think, like the requirement for Missouri River Joint Board, don't quote me on this, I think that requirement would actually go away,
Yeah.
I think. But again, I'm not totally certain on that.
So it's still it's still being decided? Or has it passed?
It's being heard.
It's being heard, okay.
Like, I think today and tomorrow.
Okay.
I think it's got to come out on the House committee. Their deadline is tomorrow to get them out of the committees. And
Okay.
so then it'll go back to the Senate, some concurrent committees to,
So guys, at the May meeting, do we need to establish a written policy? I mean, we already kind of have a policy, but to my knowledge, it's not in writing.
yeah, I think, by the time the law is effective, I think we'd be good, which would be July 1.
Yeah.
And so I think it would be July 1, right?
Do we have a policy manual?
We do.
We
I don't know
have,
if it's
right,
silent.
we have a policy manual. There's some things, it's not been formalized, it's not been adopted, but there's a lot of elements in here. I'm thinking from this, Mr. Chairman, that basically a brief statement that Dave and I can probably work on, one paragraph and cover it. I mean, it's not complicated, and you just adopt it in your minutes, and then it's policy. Whether it's in a policy manual actually published, I mean, that's another element, but I think all you need to do is just pass a general policy, include it in your minutes, be covered. Is that reasonable, Dave?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, you're basically confirming what you're already doing.
Right.
And we can do that and stick it in the manual. I think that's fine.
Okay.
Some of the topics, the law says you should develop a policy, but, you say you may limit the time per speaker and total time allowed for that particular topic. The comments got to be pertinent to your board. You can't come in here and talk about, highways and what's wrong with the highway department, that kind of stuff, so. Anyway, pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Dennis, what's the number of the management of multiple water districts?
There's 2276.
That's a part of that, 2276. Okay, thanks.
And then 2210 is the study, the interim study that I think is already approved,
Okay.
or will be approved.
On the joint board. Yeah.
Kind of the same topic, two different legislations, but yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Good discussion. Okay, we can move on to other items of new business this morning. I don't think there's any update. We submitted those updates to those that are water permit last month. Item C, I think there were some emails back and forth coming from Travis with the low-key contract regarding his insurance, where he's going to help provide some maintenance on a few of our projects.
He's guaranteed me he'll have insurance by the end of the month.
By the end of April?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm still not had a good answer for you.
Okay. Next month then? And then items, the next item D there, the multi-hazard mitigation plan. So in your packet on pages 19 is some correspondence regarding these action plans for MRCC in Fox Island. So basically, these have just been updated. There were some name changes with some of the, I think some of the streets, and they updated the aerial photo. And then Mary's just looking for any changes by April 11th. And so I think at this point we don't, or does Mary want to discuss? Yeah. Morning again.
Different plan.
Yeah.
That's the flood annex. We are also updating the county's multi-hazard mitigation plan. This undergoes a thorough review by FEMA every 5 years. The approval of this plan makes us eligible for the HMGP grants like we're doing with University of Mary. So I'm looking for projects from the board that help lessen or completely remove issues. Really what I'm looking for is a member of the board and Michael, because Michael has a lot of history, to work in a subgroup to help update the flood information, history,
Okay.
landslide. So if there's a member that would like to participate in that, we'd love to have you.
Any volunteers?
I can do it.
Roger? Okay. That'll work.
All right, thanks, Roger.
Mary, so when is that update happening? Is the process just starting, or are you in the
Yep,
middle of it?
we have been doing some updates, but we're mainly looking for projects. The history stuff I can work on and go back and forth with Mike on that too, but projects you've worked on, completed, costs, future projects, just things that the board's looking
Are you
at.
doing that in-house, or you?
Yes, yes. I am one of the few county emergency managers that does not contract that out.
Okay. Any questions for Mary? Thanks, Mary.
Thanks.
Thanks for clarifying that. Okay. And then additionally, in your packet there, you'll see those changes to some of those documents too, as far as the action plans there. Okay. Next item, item E, NDERF is the annual meeting, as Dennis kind of mentioned earlier. There is their annual meeting coming up on, I think it's May 8th. So if anybody's interested in attending, I don't think we've ever sent anybody in the past, but certainly if this is what you enjoy to do, you could certainly fill out there is a RSVP form to fill out, and they want that by no later than May 7th. So, but it is in the packet on page 24 if you're interested in attending. Okay, nothing else on that. The next couple items in your packet there are just some temporary water permits that have been provided in your packet. Any questions on those? Okay, hearing none. Additional correspondence regarding kind of plats, stormwater management plans can be available upon request. There's one in there listed as a subdivision plat there for Summit Point for their second subdivision. I don't know, Casey, is there any updates regarding kind of where they're heading with some of this? Good morning again.
Morning. Summit Point, second subdivision, that's just taking 2 lots and making them into 1 lot. So there's really no impact on
Okay.
that.
Okay, thanks, Casey. All right. Okay, can move on to item 13 this morning, approval of this month's bills.
Mr. Chairman, board members, on page 33 is the summary of the bills. You'll notice it's quite a large number. A couple reasons for that. There's 3 bond payments that are in the amount of, almost 130,000, probably, 130,000 by themselves on Burnt Creek, MRCC, and Fox Island. The other thing of note is that Houston Engineering wasn't able to submit bills in last month, so there's basically 2 months' worth of invoices from Houston Engineering, so those are a little bit larger than they normally would be. And then our board payments are in there as well. So we do have one item to add with board's consideration to this. As the Secretary Treasurer, I have a need of Excel and Microsoft Word for my tasks here. And so there's a monthly payment. It comes due annually. It came due April 3rd. It comes directly out of my credit card account. And so that was been paid, and so I submitted that to Wendy, and she has the check ready for me if the board approves it. So it's in the amount of $106.92. for the entire year, upcoming year. So that would raise the total amount on here to $173,332.08.
In 6 cents, you said?
8.
8 cents. Okay.
That's not bad for 2 months.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like Dennis said, it's the big
Mostly the
piece
bond
is those those 3 bond payments that you do, yeah. So, okay.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of payment of bills in the amount of $173,332.08.
Second.
Okay. Got a motion by Manager Reap and a second by Manager Jones to approve this month's bills as adjusted. Any discussion? If not, you take roll call vote, please.
Okay, Manager Mitchell,
Yes.
Manager Reap,
Yes.
Manager Jones.
Yes.
Manager Smith,
Yes.
Chairman Manager.
Yes. Motion passes. Bills will be paid. Okay, thank you, Dennis. Moving on, the additional information regarding, the detail on the bills in your packet. And I think that does it for our regular agenda. So at this point, we are going to close our monthly board meeting to entertain a motion to hold an executive session pursuant to North Dakota Century Code 44-4-19.2 to discuss negotiation strategy with our attorney related to easement acquisitions on the McDowell Dam project. The board has provided notice of this executive meeting in its agenda for this month. So I would now entertain that motion to adjourn this monthly meeting and move into our executive
So
session.
moved.
Okay, got a motion by Manager Jones.
I'll second.
And a second by Manager Smith to adjourn this meeting and move into our executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Ayes have it. We are adjourned.